To build strong father-son bonds, we must break generational patterns. When I was younger, life was almost like the Huxtables from The Cosby Show. Mom worked at Tennessee State University, and Dad was a doctor. But we didn't quite live the silver spoon lifestyle. See, Dad worked at the community hospital and not in private practice. So there was no big house, name brand clothes, or fancy cars. But Dad was a good man. And like his father before him, he was focused and worked a lot to provide us with a stable and comfortable home. But because he worked a lot, it also meant that he missed most of my school performances, games, and there was little time for us to hang out, play catch, or go skating. And like many men from his generation, saying things like, "good job," or "I love you," was rare. Now, he did love me, but saying it out loud just wasn't what he was taught. For many of us, our parents provide our sense of stability and comfort and safety. And while my dad wasn't as present as I would have liked or as expressive as I would have liked, I knew that he cared. And then my parents divorced and everything changed. I moved to the Northeast with my mom and shuttled back and forth between her place in Philadelphia and Dad in Nashville. The stable home environment that I was used to was now gone. Now, life in Philly was different. It was fast, tough, aggressive. And to keep up, I had to grow up. This also coincided with my growing interest in girls, music, fashion, and how to handle the school bully. Now, Mom did her best and taught me a whole lot. But for this phase, I needed more input and instruction from Dad. To put it simple, I needed his guidance. But in our summer times together, Dad would lean more into being a disciplinarian. I guess we both had different ideas of how we spend our time together. What I wanted was to spend quality time hanging out, playing basketball, talking about girls. But Dad would fill our summer times with life lessons of hard work and responsibility. He even made me get a job, save my money so I could buy my own computer. Then he made me do yard work when my friends came over. That's what I remember about those days. And when we did spend time together, it was often me waiting long hours for him at the hospital. Not my idea of quality time. So as our relationship bonds grew weaker, my frustration grew stronger. And that frustration fueled my rebellion. So like most teenagers, I spent hours in my room listening to music or hanging out with everybody besides Dad. Then over a number of summers, things finally came to a head when I turned 16. There was a concert that my friends were going to, and I wanted to go too. But Dad said no. So I went anyway, without his knowledge, without his permission. Then when I showed back up the next day, unannounced and unapologetic, and with the girl I'd been hanging out with, it was the last straw. Dad packed my bags and kicked me out of the house. Literally, I remember sitting on this front porch with all my stuff locked out as he drove to work. Then one of his friends came to get me so that way I could stay with them for the rest of the summer. One thing was clear. Dad had had enough of me. That was my last summer spending with him. As I think back on it, Dad just didn't understand me. And to be honest, I didn't really understand him either. So I promised myself that when I had kids, it'd be different. I'd be a cool dad. I'd be someone that they could talk to. I'd be fun. I'd be there to listen to things that were important to them. I would be their superhero. So when I finally had kids of my own, I was active. I changed diapers. I read stories. I that play dates. I bought them the coolest sneakers. I even helped coach my son's baseball team, and that is not my sport. I was present and involved, and simply put, I loved my boys and I wanted them to know it. Then, after years of hard work, my career took off. I'm a filmmaker, which makes me a freelance contractor. So, like my peers, I work as much as I can when there's work. So finally, I'm living my dream. And like dad, I was focused, had a hard work ethic, and I also used my newfound creativity to do it. But also like dad, I found myself stressed and away from family. I found it hard to relax when I came home from those long jobs away. I began noticing that my children were growing and changing without me. I felt guilty for not being constantly present for them. So I overcompensated. I scheduled sports and martial arts and trips and all the activities that I wanted to do with my own dad when I was a kid. And it was exhausting for all of us. Plus, since I was gone so much, I even decided to be more of the disciplinarian when I was home. It's a little more strict and gave them extra chores to instill that good old-fashioned work ethic. Sound familiar? When my older son went into middle school, he was going through this awkward pre-puberty phase. So I took him to work with me one Saturday so we could talk while I prepped for the next week. It's kind of like dad had done with me at the hospital in our summers together. I began to realize that I was becoming my dad 2.0. See, I was reliving the same patterns of behavior that I learned from him growing up. Now, to be honest, some of those patterns can serve us well, like teaching us how to focus, accomplish a goal, or empowering us to take action. But in my scenario, I was dealing with navigating a rising career in a fickle industry while still attempting to be a hands-on father. So, determined to do things different, I got advice from friends, also known as my village of cool dads. So I began listening to my son and doing more of the things that he enjoyed. My village and I began doing group activities with our sons. We even went camping for a father-son rites of passage weekend event. Finally, I was breaking the negative father-son patterns that I had with my dad, or so I thought. Then COVID struck and everything changed. Suddenly, I, like the majority of the world, was at home. At first, I enjoyed my time for rest and to be with family. But then, it kind of became to feel a little bit claustrophobic for everybody. Plus, I could no longer go and hang out with friends or escape to my superhero job. And now being locked down with my now teenage son, things only escalated. One night, he went too far in asserting his independence. Kind of like I did with my dad that fateful summer when I got locked out of the house. And like my dad with me, I wasn't having it with my son either. Now, thanks to my wife, my son did not wind up locked out and on the front porch. But I do remember feeling frustrated. I was wondering, why is parenting so hard? I thought I had this fatherhood thing figured out. I had made the necessary adjustments. So how did I get here? How did we get here? Negative father-son patterns are notoriously hard to break, even when we are aware of them. In my case, those things were born out of guilt, my being stubborn, and even a little controlling. And ultimately, they impacted what I wanted the most, which is to get my son to understand that I loved and cared about him. But fortunately for me, I'd been able to lay a great foundation over the years of a more communicative relationship with my boys, in the years leading up to the pandemic. Plus, I had the benefit of being able to discuss parental challenges with my wife and my village of cool dads. This, along with the encouragement of a professional counselor, allowed me to be able to rediscover my vision for the father that I wanted to be. So I sat down with my son. Only this time I listened with the sure intent of understanding where he was coming from. He opened up, and we talked and connected in ways that brought us closer together. See, this fatherhood thing has given me a newfound respect and appreciation for my own dad. He, like my mom, simply did the best they could with the emotional tools that they were taught. Years later, my father passed away. And in the final months before cancer took his life, we were finally able to sit down, connect, and talk. He had finally achieved the work-life balance that he'd always craved. And that allowed us to connect in different ways that we never had before. At this stage, he finally got the one thing that he wanted, for us to be closer together. During that time, it also enabled me to understand and get to know this superhero of a man that was respected by his patients, colleagues, and our community. See, fatherhood isn't for the faint of heart. And one of the things that I was able to get from my dad is that I saw how he lived his last days, and how he lived his last days is how I'd like to live the rest of my life, with gratitude, appreciation, and understanding. When he left, we all felt understood, loved, and cared for by him. Now today, fatherhood still isn't easy. It's still tough raising a child, especially a teenage boy. But if what we truly desire is a more loving and caring relationship with our children, then that exists on the other side of the fear and discomfort of learning new ways of doing things. Plus, if we're able to examine internally our patterns of behavior and what drives them, then we too can learn to show up for our kids in ways that they most need us to. That allows us to build memories and moments with them along the way that show them who we really are as parents. Ultimately, we'll provide them with a healthy and stable platform that they can use that to become the amazing adults that they'll be. Thank you.